We talked about the proportionality, we talked about distinction, and we looked at specific examples. And these, again, are just one of many, many, many. I mean, if I was going to tell you everything we heard everything we heard in a week, we would be here for at least a week, or if not longer. The next thing I want to talk about is the use of weapons. So one thing that Israel said, propagated, is that it used weapons legally. It's most moral, moral army in the world, or whatever it propagates. The problem is that this has been countered by every single human rights group that has gone to Gaza. Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, even when we went, we ourselves saw white phosphorus burning. And this here, this clump of white phosphorus, we went February 2nd to February 8th. This was about 3 weeks after the unilateral ceasefire. When I was taking photos in an Olive Garden, I had a Palestinian, one of my friends, he was Palestinian, he was with me, and he was showing me something in the garden, and I look over and his pants are literally lit on fire. And I was like, what's happening? Your pants are on fire. And what had happened is that he had unearthed a white phosphorus clump that had fallen on the Olive Garden at least 3 weeks prior. And the thing is with white phosphorus, it continues to burn so long as it's exposed to oxygen. And this white phosphorus clump had been hidden under the sand, but because we had been moving around in this field, he had unearthed the white phosphorus clump, and it actually continued to light and ignite. I'm going to talk more about white phosphorus. So white phosphorus is not an illegal weapon in and of itself. It is not illegal. You can use it, but you cannot use it against civilians. First, that's the most basic. Again, there's a basic trend: don't hurt civilians. That's basically the 101 of international law: don't hurt civilians. So white phosphorus, the way that it was used and designed, it was used as a smoke screen. So, for example, in Iraq, when you have soldiers coming in open battlefield, they're coming in through the desert, they want to try to hide their movement. So what do? They blow up a white phosphorus missile. And the white phosphorus will hide them, they will smoke screen their movement. And that's the way, that's the idea of white phosphorus. It was never intended to be used as an actual weapon. And that is how it was used in Gaza. It was not used at night. Many times it was not used at night at all. It was used in plain daytime. And many times it was not even used around troop movement. It was just used as a weapon. And this, again, is completely illegal. Because not only is white phosphorus indiscriminate, it does not have pinpoint accuracy. So even if you're trying to attack, again, a military objective, white phosphorus is not the way to go. It does not have pinpoint accuracy. And it's incendiary, so it burns. It has a very, very harmful reaction that causes, and I apologize about some of the next pictures coming up, but it causes burns. It causes very, very deep burns. In addition to burns, it actually is absorbed by your bloodstream. When white phosphorus hits your body, it is absorbed by your bloodstream, and it actually causes heart failure, it causes kidney failure, it causes multiple organ failure. And so it's extremely, extremely problematic as a weapon. And there are other things, and this is something that Human Rights Watch issued a 71-page report, and I was actually just in D.C. for a congressional briefing where they briefed Congress on this. And it's very clear that white phosphorus is not the way to go. If you are trying to create a smoke screen effect, there are other weapons that can be used as smoke screens that cannot do this to civilians. But Israel instead used white phosphorus. And it's interesting when you look at how Israel, at first they denied any use of white phosphorus. They're like, no, we didn't use white phosphorus. Then, after, everybody's kind of like, well, that looks like white phosphorus. They're like, oh, well, no, okay, well, we're going to investigate it. And then, a few weeks later, they're like, or a few days later, or however, I don't know the timeline, they're like, oh, okay, but we did it, we were very careful in the way we used it. And it's like, it's very clear from the rhetoric that's coming from the IDF and from the Israeli military that there's a lot of problems that are happening within the military. There's a lot of, people are not following protocol, international laws or protocol, and white phosphorus was extensively used as a result against the population. Now white phosphorus, again, it keeps burning so long as it's exposed to oxygen. So when it hits, for example, when it hits your skin, it will continue to consume your flesh and go all the way to your bones so long as it's exposed to oxygen. Now people in Gaza didn't know this, and they didn't know what white phosphorus was because white phosphorus has never really been used. So when you had people, and I'll have Dr. Nefez Abu Shaban talk about this more, but you had basically every day there would be hundreds of people coming into the hospitals. And so what the doctors would do, they would try to shuttle people out of the hospital So the people that were really heavily injured, they would send to Egypt, so they could get treatment in Egypt. Other people, they would send home. They give them some Neosporin, they give them something simple to try to deal with their pains or their injuries. So many people who were hit by white phosphorus that they didn't look like they were very problematic injuries, they just thought they were normal burns, they would send them home. The problem is that white phosphorus continued to consume their flesh. And so they would come in with a small burn, and 2 days later they would come back and their entire body would be had been burnt off. Their entire flesh had been burnt off. And only 2 weeks later, when doctors who had been in Lebanon in 2006 came and basically told them, this is white phosphorus, and the way you treat white phosphorus, you actually have to remove the flesh. Anything that had any contact with white phosphorus, you have to remove it. That's when they actually started to treat patients who got white phosphorus burns properly. But until then, many people actually died from stuff from white phosphorus, from very minor burns. According to Dr. Neff, a minor burn is about 10 to 12% of your body.
في وقت الحرب كنا كل يوم نحاول نفضي السراير نفضي المستشفى عشان نتوقع انه يجينا اعداد كبيره من المصابين. فالحالات اللي وضعها مستقره او الحالات اللي شايفين عندهم شكلها بسيط كنا بعدها نروح مع البيت. وهذا للاسف كان من احد الاسباب اللي خلتنا اكتشفنا حكايه الفوسفور. كنا الحالات نبعثها حالات بسيطه نعالجها كانها حالات حروق عاديه. نروحها على البيت بعد كم يوم يرجعوا لنا الحروق صارت عميقه المساحه اوسع. بعض الحالات وضعهم يجونا بوضع سيء حتى انفطامهم توفوا ماتوا رغم انه مساحه الحروق عندهم كانت بسيطه. يعني كانت مساحه الحروق عندهم يزيد عن 10 او 12% من مساحه الجسم.
So one of Samia Salman al-Manai, she's age 16. She's actually somebody I also interviewed when I was there. On January 10th, she's an example of a white phosphorus victim. On January 10th, 2009, around 8 p.m., she was sleeping in her room on her bed with her mother. They were sleeping, and all of a sudden, a white phosphorus missile came crashing through her window into her room, and she basically lit on fire. So Samia continued to burn. So the white phosphorus hit her. She continued to burn for about 15 minutes. She had passed out by this time, lost consciousness. She continued to burn for 15 minutes as they were trying to extinguish the fire. First, they brought water, and they tried to extinguish the fire through water. The problem is the water has oxygen, so it doesn't work. Then they tried to bring other liquids. Again, it didn't work. Finally, 15 minutes later, a neighbor came in and gave them some sand, and that's how they extinguished the fire. When I met her on February 2nd, I believe. That was 3 weeks afterwards. She had skin grafted from her thigh area to her lower leg area. And she's getting treated, but it's going to take a very long time. She continues to be in intensive care. It's going to be many, many, many months before she can walk again. And so she's just one, and she actually has probably a less extreme case of white phosphorus. Many of the most extreme white phosphorus cases were actually sent to Egypt. So I didn't personally meet them, but I talked to Amnesty folks who did meet them, and just the stories and just telling us how these victims looked. Their entire bodies were bandaged. Many of these people also died. Many of the more extreme cases died of white phosphorus. In addition to white phosphorus, which has been heavily talked about and discussed by Human Rights Watch, Amnesty, there's been confirmed use of flechettes, and there's many, many people who believe very strongly that dye was used. Now flechettes, the doctor showed me a whole bag he had full of these flechettes, and basically they're small little darts, and so the weapon, basically you have 5,000 to 8,000 of these darts packed into this missile. And so when you launch the missile and the missile hits, these darts go flying everywhere. And because of the impact of the explosion, and they come flying very, very, very quickly, and they can be lodged in your body, and it's very difficult to take them out. Flechettes are not illegal in and of themselves. They are completely illegal to be used against civilians or densely populated areas where civilians are known to reside.